Ugh. Now that I've arrived, I immediately regret coming back to this world. Why is it always raining here? Finton? What are you doing back here? Well, for starters, you haven't written any new Devine stories, so I've been entirely bored. Yeah, that's fair. Well, anyway, I'm glad you're here. This week's guest on the show is actually Mary Ellen Brady. You remember her, don't you? Haha, of course! How could I forget the writer who gave me the finest outfit I've ever worn? Oh, yeah, that reminds me, did you also see your picture? I'm sorry, picture? Yeah, Tamsin Gordon drew this amazing art piece. Here, take a look, what do you think? Ah, I think she captured my good side, haha! My word, this is wonderful! See, this place isn't so bad, you got fans here in this world, Finton. Listen, I appreciate the support, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, where is Mary Ellen, then? Oh, she's not actually here. I sent her some interview questions and she wrote down her answers, so we'll get to hear what she said later in the show. Ah, very good then. Can I get you anything else while you're here? Coffee? Tea? Actually, you know what I could go for? What's that? Some intro music. Let's get this show on the road. I want to hear Mary Ellen's interview. My word, for a storyteller, you really know how to bury the lead. Okay, I walked right into that one. Welcome, everyone, to the Saved as Draft podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 24 of the Saved as Draft podcast. This week's episode is all about hosting your own writing challenge. But first, we'll do some quick housekeeping before getting into this week's shoutouts, including a nod to all the level 3 stories for my first ever power-up prompt. After that, we'll dive into our discussion topic on the aforementioned writing challenges, before diving into an interview with Mary Ellen Brady. Mary Ellen opted to write in her answers, so the prompt goddess herself will be joining us to read the answers live on the air. If you enjoy Mary Ellen's brand of magical prose, I think you're really going to enjoy hearing the story behind her stories. After that, we'll answer some excellent questions from the community in this week's Echoes from the Void segment, and we'll wrap things up with a look at what's happening next week, right here on Substack. And next up, I'd like to shout out a new member of the community. Kaylee Robison is an author and artist best known for the Tides of Deception book series, but she's also one of the original Audio Mazes authors, which is how I initially met her. Kaylee also did the art for the cover of my first Audio Mazes book, Dragon's Domain, which if you haven't heard is out right now. That's right. If you subscribe to Audio Mazes, you can get access to the whole library, including my biggest, most complex branching narrative that I've ever created. Not only that, but you'll get to experience it with professional narration, sound effects, and voice acting. And, if you listen carefully, you may even hear my voice in there a few times. It was my first ever audiobook, so I had to pull a Stan Lee and give myself a cameo. But anyway, back to Kaylee. She just joined Substack this week, and she's already hit the ground running. She's already published a couple articles about writing, and she also posted a new story for week 3 of Meg's ongoing June Writing Challenge over on Milk and Honey. Let's give Kaylee a warm welcome. You can find a link to her publication in the show notes to subscribe and check out what she's got going on. Before we get into this weekly's shoutouts for the stories, I want to thank everyone who participated in the first ever Power Up prompt. I'll be shouting out the level 3 stories later in the episode, but if you're ready for the next one, you won't have to wait long. Power Up prompt number 2 will be live tomorrow with new prompts every Saturday going forward as a little way to keep you on your toes until I launch my next big writing challenge event. Alright, that's it for housekeeping this week. Let's get to the shoutouts. Every week on Tuesdays, I open a thread for people to share links for the chance to be featured here on the show. I also share links with Mina Howell and her Penny Dreadfuls podcast, and vice versa. We had a bunch of folks submit links this week, and I love to see it. I've selected 5 at random, so let's jump right in. Our first shout out this week is Imperfections by Laura Catanzano. This is a wonderful poem about the bond between a child and their mother. It focuses in on those moments when the child is a newborn and they're exploring and learning more about the world around them through their touch. Each stanza weaves in beautiful lines about the child's tiny hands and how they search their mother's face for imperfections and things that make her unique. It's a heartwarming piece that captures those wonderful moments that you can't quite put into words. It reminds me of a memory of my own, actually, where I was sitting in the backseat of my parents' car. I must have been, a teenager, and my baby cousin was in her car seat beside me. We were driving through a tunnel in a big city, I think it may have been Atlanta, and she started crying when it got dark, and the tunnel, of course, is very loud when you're driving through it. I remember reaching out with my hand to comfort her, and I still recall the way that her tiny fingers could only grasp just the pinky on my hand, and it was such a profound moment. She held on to my pinky for dear life, and stopped crying and didn't let go until we were out of the tunnel. I love how this poem brought back that memory for me. And it's true. When we're children, we explore through touch first before we develop our other senses. It's a beautiful form of connection. Here's a stanza from the poem that I really enjoyed. I'll tell you something. Her small hand against my skin, serene and sweet, she takes my flaws. She makes them beautiful. An amazing piece. Check the show notes for a link. Second this week is Demons by Artemis. This piece was done for a Turtles of Alchemy prompt called Window. The microfiction piece here is really chilling. It tells the story of someone who's haunted by the sight of demons just outside their window. And no one believes her, but she fears that one day they will break through and get her, so she just watches. The anxiety builds throughout the piece until we reach a breaking point at the end. I loved how Artemis builds the tension here throughout the entire story. Here's an excerpt that I really enjoyed. She tried telling them, her daddy, her therapist, the man who lived with her for a couple months before she scared him off. They didn't listen. How could they? Only she can see this window in her mind, this thin veil of glass that separates her thoughts from the demons. Her demons. She can feel the glass vibrating. It makes her temples throb. A hairline crack slits through the window. Don't let them in. Amazing. Notice how you can feel the tension rising with every single line. Masterful work. Check the show notes for a link. Third this week is Food for the Poisoned Child by Birdie Falling. Based on the author's note at the beginning, it seems like this story may be inspired by real experiences, and it's honestly a really relevant piece. It tells the story of a young girl in a small town who experiences racism for the first time, and wonders why the whole town seems to hate her for no reason. The story uses haunting and surreal imagery to paint powerful metaphors about the kinds of things that are happening in small towns all across America to this very moment. It's incredibly well written, but it's also deeply haunting. It brings to light the sort of things that many people would like to think don't happen anymore. They believe this kind of blatant racism and xenophobia is in the past, but the truth is, it still happens all around us, every single day. And of course, in today's day and age, it's become even more prevalent. All you have to do is turn on the news to see how it's corrupting our world and further destroying our society from within. Here's an excerpt that really hit home for me. She was 7 when she learned her first racial slur, starved of love and confused why the whole town was cold. Did no one know warmth here? Were they all zombies with no beating hearts? Why the mean faces? What had she done? She was 9, the only brown girl in a sea of pale, made to play the villain in a school play. They pulled her out of a shiny, sterile bathroom to dry her tears and learn her role. Dressed in devil black, she held her shattered dignity like entrails from a gut wound, and chased the innocent porcelain girls, all playing pink princesses. This story is a perfect example of how we can bring to light real experiences and issues that need to be discussed. It's also done so in a way that drives home the emotional impact that these things have on people, and in this case, children. It's a reminder that we're all human at the end of the day. No matter where we come from, or what color our skin may be, we're human beings, and we all deserve respect and love. I really appreciate works like this. Check the show notes for a link. Fourth this week is Crimson Devotion, Growing, by Ashes of Love Poetry. This is a horror poem that also manages to be incredibly beautiful despite the deeper implications. It tells the story of someone who became obsessed with the idea of feeling and even tasting love. In this case, they believe the physical manifestation of love to be the blood that runs through our veins. So they use this metaphor throughout the piece to tell a haunting story that ends with a chilling final line. If you like your poetry beautiful and haunting in equal measure, I think you'll really enjoy this one. Here's an excerpt that I enjoyed. How can anyone claim to love if they haven't truly felt what runs the heart? People think it's a concept, an abstract. It's not. You can feel love, taste it, and smell it. You just have to slice first. Oh, truly chilling work. But it's also kind of romantic in like a twisted sort of way. You can check it out for yourself at the link in the show notes. Fifth this week is Golgotha by Kat Pierce. This is an absolutely incredible narrative poem that tells the story of a twisted serial killer. It's a truly chilling piece that sets up a haunting atmosphere from the very first stanza and never lets up. Every stanza also flows very smoothly, but it reads almost like the script of a documentary as it details the mind of the killer and the ways he would deceive and kidnap his targets. The piece even uses a VHS-style featured image to give it a sort of found footage feel that I really enjoyed. It's so comprehensive that it feels like it could easily be based on a true story. There's enough detail and believability to it that I'm honestly not sure, and I mean that as a compliment, of course, because it's a sign that the piece was incredibly well written and extremely well put together as well. Here's an excerpt that jumped out at me. Outside of a shopping mall, far away, a girl sees him dressed up like an officer and trusts him instinctively. Someone has broken into your car, he says. We need you to come down to the station. She gets into his vehicle. Why would he lie? Why would he want to hurt her? I really love how atmospheric this piece is, and how it brings in elements of how his victims are forced to watch the horrors continue long after they're gone. This is honestly one of my favorite poems I've read in a while. Check the show notes for a link. And that's it for this week's shoutouts, but next up we have a brand new segment, which is our Power Up Prompt Recap. In this part of the show, we'll look at stories who participated in my new weekly Power Up Prompt segment, and specifically, I'll call out stories that used all three elements of the multi-layered prompt that I provided, thereby earning them a designation of level 3. You can find a new Power Up Prompt post on the Writer's Journey every Saturday if you'd like to join in. Remember, you can use anywhere between 1 to 3 elements of the prompt that I give you, and I'll check it out. If you go for level 3 though and incorporate everything, your story will get mentioned in this new segment of the show each week as well. We had 6 people submit level 3 stories this week for the first ever Power Up Prompt, which is an amazing start to this new weekly series. For Power Up Prompt number 1, I gave everyone a cliff setting with some backstory, an archaeologist character, and a conflict involving forbidden land and a mysterious portal. So the following stories here used all 3 of those elements, thereby making them level 3 stories. First this week was Mina Howell's Alterum Partem, which was an excellent story that throws the reader right into the action as our archaeologist character finds themselves exploring dangerous terrain only to stumble upon the find of a lifetime. Mina's story here used all 3 elements expertly, but where it really shines is in the way it throws the reader right into the action. As it goes on, an expert use of a flashback mechanic fills in some of the backstory, only for the ending to hit you like a ton of bricks. Check out the show notes for a link. Our second level 3 story this week was God is Love by Sammy O'Neill. This story used all 3 elements, but took things in a direction inspired by Norse mythology. We get cameos from gods like Odin and Thor, while also enjoying some intense dialogue and some surprising philosophical discussion about modern society that we know. This one also has an absolutely killer ending that caught me entirely off guard, but made complete sense in retrospect. I love it when a twist hits just right like that. So check this one out if you're even a passing fan of Norse mythology. I think you'll love it. There's a link in the show notes. Our third level 3 story this week is Cowards Die Many Times Before Their Deaths by Janine Eby. This one was a narrative poem that leveraged all 3 elements of the prompt and inspired me to actually write my first ever narrative poem later in the week. My poem, of course, was for a different prompt involving Meg's horror writing challenge, but I have to give credit where it's due. This piece by Janine really got me excited about narrative poems in general. I loved how Janine worked in real characters and plot development into these lyrical stanzas. The result was this amazing combination of artistic word choice and compelling world building, all wrapped in one. It's not an easy thing to pull off, but she did it expertly in this piece. Check the show notes for a link. Our fourth level 3 story this week is The Cliffs of Ashaketh by Mary Ellen Brady. This is a perfect example of how Mary Ellen can weave a believable world and characters from just about anything. She uses the prompt elements perfectly here, and she lays the groundwork for something much larger. The story even ends on a cliffhanger, with a promise of more to come. I must say, the questions she posed in the first chapter were incredibly compelling, and it's clear that she has a lot more to say based on some of the concepts that are introduced here. Check the show notes for a link, and subscribe to Mary Ellen if you haven't, so you can check out new chapters in this surprise series. Our fifth level 3 story this week is Walker of Ways by Richard Pack. Richard was actually the first person to submit a story to the Power Up prompt here, which made me extremely happy since I'm a huge fan of his work. As I've mentioned before, Richard is also an Audio Mazes author like myself, and I've been listening to his book World Spark over there. It's fantastic, and Walker of Ways is another excellent example of why his writing works so well. The story puts us right into the action, drawing readers into the opening scene within just a few sentences. From there, it moves the plot forward at a steady pace while also expertly weaving in elements of backstory and lore. Before long, the world and its characters feel like something you've spent an entire book getting to know, but it's accomplished in a fraction of the time. The ending is also an epic mic drop, with a final line that hits just right. I'm consistently impressed with how Richard packs so much concentrated narrative into his stories, but he's quite literally done it again with this one. Check the show notes for a link. Our sixth and final level 3 story this week is In the Valley So Deep by Victor Jimenez. This story caught me off guard in the best way possible. The opening begins incorporating elements of the prompt really well, but an early clue points to the setting being a futuristic version of our world, although it feels more primitive because it's so far in the future. That moment of familiarity immediately grabbed my attention as my mind started racing about the implications of it all. As the story goes on, we get more and more connections between this world and our own, and before everything can be revealed, the story ends on a brutal cliffhanger. I gotta say, I'm absolutely hooked, though. Victor did an amazing job building a captivating and endlessly intriguing mystery here. I'm really excited to see what part 2 entails. And that's it for this week, but thank you to everyone who submitted stories for the first ever Power Up prompt. I'm very excited to see what you do with our second prompt and its 3 unique elements, which will be coming your way tomorrow, so stay tuned. Next up is this week's writing discussion. I wanted to talk about hosting your own writing challenge. I bring this up because I've seen a lot of people hosting events in June, and I want to encourage even more writers to try their hand at it. As you may or may not know, my first writing event here on Substack was Flash Fiction February earlier in 2025. But I also did a 30-day challenge last month in May called Madness and Mayhem that went really well too. Writing challenges are an amazing way to grow your publication and meet a lot of new people in the community. They can also inspire you to try new genres or story structures, which lets you grow as a writer. The only real downside is they take a lot of time and energy to plan and execute. With my tips, though, you'll be well on your way before you know it. So, here are 3 tips from me on how to host a successful writing challenge or event here on Substack. Tip number 1 is to give your challenge a compelling theme. Decide on a genre, a unique hook, or even just a catchy title. Something that will intrigue people and make them want to learn more. Flash Fiction February is self-explanatory, but Madness and Mayhem was a little different. The latter challenge was all about keeping writers on their toes. You never knew what the next day's prompt or challenge would hold. Every day was an adventure. It was utter madness, you might say. I also gave that event its own visual identity. Everything was themed around insanity and Lovecraftian horror, which made it easy to spot one of my prompts or challenges from a mile away, and that's the goal. You want people to be able to see your event's posts and materials and immediately recognize them as part of your challenge. Prompts obviously work really well too, but you can experiment with other things as well. Why not try running a contest where the winner gets a gift card to a bookstore? Or maybe you want to publish an online magazine so you open submissions with a specific challenge or prompt to guide people's stories. The possibilities really are endless, so my advice is just have fun with it, and remember, if you give it a unique identity both in name and concept, you'll get more people checking it out. Tip number 2 is to set a schedule that you can stick to. A few of my challenges have been daily, with new prompts every single day for 30 days straight. That is not easy to do. Others have had success with weekly prompts, and that's totally fine as well. Even if you want to host a big challenger event on a monthly basis, people will show up if you continue to promote it and actively encourage new entries. Don't stress about making it something that has to be active every day. What matters is that it's interesting and that you can properly support it, so choose a schedule that works for you. Tip number 3 is to read and share the entries. Now this may seem obvious, but if you host a challenge and you don't check out the stuff that people are creating, the energy is going to die down pretty quick. You should make it a point to read the work that people submit and look for ways to share it as well. That can be as simple as leaving a comment and restacking it, or you can do roundups where you list the links to all the entries and share some thoughts on each one. Obviously, depending on the size of the challenge, you may not be able to get to everyone, but in those cases, I would just try to get to as many as you can. Remember, it's all about community. We should be reading, sharing, and leaving feedback on each other's work. It's how we grow. And those are my 3 tips on hosting a writing challenge. Let me know if you plan on hosting one yourself in the comments of this episode, and I'll be sure to check it out. Next up is this week's guest interview. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this week's guest is Mary Ellen Brady. As with all of the interviews on my show here, I offer people the chance to either record an audio interview with me, or they can submit their answers in written form to be read on the show. It's really important to me that anyone who wants to be on the podcast here can come on and tell their story however they wish, whether that's via audio or sending over written answers. Mary Ellen opted for the written interview option and sent over some amazing answers to my questions about her and her work. To help me read the answers on the air here, I've brought in the prompt goddess herself, Sarah Rush. So let's get this week's interview with author Mary Ellen Brady on the road. All right, everybody, and this week our featured guest is someone who's known throughout the community for her stories that leap from genre to genre in recent months. But the place that she calls home is a world known as Starlight Cove, where many of her stories are set. Now, as I've mentioned before, I allow guests to send in written answers if they prefer not to be recorded. So today's guest has chosen that option, and I've brought on the prompt goddess Sarah Rush herself to read the answers. So please, welcome to the Saved as Draft podcast, Mary Ellen Brady, with interview answers read by Sarah Rush. Thanks again for the help here, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
All right, first question for Mary Ellen was, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far?
Creativity has been the one thing I draw everything into. My writing, cello practice, photography, teaching. It is the air I breathe. I do not know how to exist without creativity. I know there are people that say they are not creative, but I see it in them. It is that connective thread between people, and I love seeing how others use it, but don't see it. So I hide it in my stories as a magical system because it is magic to me. That car that cut you off this morning driving to the market could inspire you to create a new movement for road safety if you're a civil worker, reshape a road, rezone an area, or think about vehicle safety for children, or write a story. That one moment affects each person differently, and that is creativity. We don't call it that, but I see that spark as our own personal magic.
Awesome. And question number two is, at what point did you decide you wanted to be a writer? Do you recall your first story?
Decide to be a writer? I had a choice. I'm a creator slash storyteller since I drew my first breath. I've always been spinning a story. I lived in my imagination and pretty much still do. My first story was from my dad. I spoke into a cassette tape around 3 and a half and told my first story. The plot was aliens on a dark and deserted highway. The aliens picked up a dad by mistake and spirited him away to Zeltar, a planet that was curious about a backward and slow moving society. The dad fought to be returned to his daughter. When my dad passed away, I found the box of cassettes. I did sound effects. All of it. Talk about books on tape. Now, Zeltar is a dead planet, so her old essence was floating in space and found Earth. Readers on Substack have met her and don't know it yet, but she still exists.
That's amazing. I love that connection. I'll have to see if I can figure out where she showed up again. The name sounds familiar. Okay, question number three. You're well known for your fictional town of Starlight Cove. Can you tell us about that connected universe and what inspired it?
Starlight Cove and its connected worlds were born from the wisdom of my Grams. Dream of the world you want to live in, not fight against what you don't. Connection between people and valuing each person is a strong message in my world. I value and believe everyone is connected. The earth and the people that live on her are connected. Valuing the environment, giving the natural world a say in the stories as a living entity, magic in the everyday is important to me. Believing is seeing because having faith in yourself is a challenge. Personal joy, no matter what your age. I find those tiny moments in ordinary life precious. When you add up all those values, you end up in Starlight Cove.
I love that answer. And having read a lot of Starlight Cove stories, I would wholeheartedly agree that that's the takeaway. That's phenomenal. Question number five is, you've spoken in the past about how you handwrite your stories first. Can you tell us about your writing process?
I'm not sure I have one set process. I do handwrite, words flow for me on paper. The computer and digital is for edits. I spill the words in disjointed concepts, then end up with arrows and notes about what memories, emotions, and etc. need to be evoked in a scene. It'll probably look like crazy doodles by the time I'm finished, but it works for me. It will be the backbone of a story, short or novel. My stories, every single one, is a scrapbook of what is happening in my life. When I was writing for your prompts, I remember Hamilton was on nonstop, so characters broke out into song and became animated cartoons. Names of characters will be centered around what is happening in my life. I have notebooks everywhere and pens. I'm always creating a story, nonstop. In my car, waiting in line, doing the dishes, it is nonstop.
I love that answer, and I feel like a lot of writers can relate to that in the sense that our brains are always in story mode, even if it's subconsciously. I also wanted to call out the musical connection there with Hamilton because I do recall, and for people listening here, try and track it down if you haven't read it. Mary Ellen did do a Devine story that was a musical, and it was wonderful. It was fairly recent. All right, question number six. What initially drew you to Substack? How are you liking it here so far?
Substack was there for me after I made a promise to my childhood best friend. She passed away last summer, and before she passed, she made me promise not to hide my stories away. I hid everything. I've been writing my entire life, and she always had this habit of asking me to tell her a story. She dreamed of being the business part of my publishing empire as a kid. So I joined Substack a few months after she passed. I was only going to share a few shorts, build my world out in private, and publish a Starlight Cove book. Promise fulfilled, and then go hide in my cave again was the plan. Sharing changed my world. People started reading my stories. Strangers. Reading my stories was weird and uncomfortable. Then I challenged myself to just play, write in every genre, find what I could do and what needed work, and go from there. Substack has become my playground. Try it all and see what happens. I just finished writing a series for my dad because I miss him. A fantasy western which I expected to just live out there with zero attention. Instead, I have comments saying that they can't wait for the movie, which makes me giggle. I wrote a centaur marshal in the Wild West, and that story has loyal returning fans. It is mind blowing to me. It was a miss you letter to my dad.
That's incredible. I have seen people talking about the Centaur Wild West story, which is just a phenomenal premise in and of itself, but I did not know that it was connected to Mary Ellen's dad. That is wonderful and a beautiful tribute. All right, question seven. Are you working on any projects outside of Substack? If so, can you tell us more about them?
There are novels in my building that I'm working on. I wouldn't say they are outside of Substack because my characters live on Substack. I learn more about them in each short I create, so they play and I find motivations and traits here that didn't exist in my novel. Like my Queen Ager characters. Motivations were limited before Substack. Now I know that my 70-year-old writer character that writes steamy romance and has fear of settling down issues is because she lost the love of her life mysteriously. I wouldn't have had that layer of her personality without your writing prompts and playing on Substack.
That's an incredible answer, and I want to call that out for everybody listening here because it really is incredible when you allow yourself to kind of jump around into different, formats, whether it be short stories, poetry, stuff like that, and let your characters, as Mary Ellen does, sort of exist elsewhere. You get to know them better, and you uncover things about them that you may not have figured out just being stuck in that one project. So that's a really, really good piece of advice from Mary Ellen there, and I love that the prompts brought her to that. Question number 8. You recently became an Audio Mazes author as well. What has your experience been like thus far over there?
Audio Mazes is an adventure. I pitched a story idea and expected, thanks, no thanks. Next, I never expected a yes. So now I'm working on creating a branching narrative story within their framework, and that is a challenge, but so fun.
It is a challenge, but I also agree that it's very fun. And as someone who just had my first Audio Mazes book published, I will say that it is absolutely worth all of the edits, the iterations, the figuring out the structure, everything. It's totally worth it. Because when you get that moment where you get to hear your own book coming back at you, professionally narrated with immersive audio, it's unreal as a writer. So I'm very excited for Mary Ellen to experience that. And our last question here is, what advice would you give to writers who are just starting out on their creative journey?
Write everything down. Seriously. Only have 10 minutes to write? Hear something in passing? Conversation helps with dialogue. Describe an ordinary item and work on sensory details. Learn new things all the time. Every moment can be used to write, grow, and learn. That builds into your unique writing practice. No two writers are alike, so yes, blaze your own trail.
Amazing, amazing. A magical answer from a magical writer. Thank you so much, Sarah, for reading Mary Ellen's answers, and thank you to Mary Ellen. I know you're listening, for coming on to the show here. Your writing is spectacular. Your worlds are amazing, and I know a lot of people are going to learn some great stuff from this interview. So thank you to you both, and thanks again, Sarah.
Of course.
All right, and thank you again to Mary Ellen Brady for sending in those wonderful answers to my interview questions, and also a big shout out to Sarah Rush for coming on to read them live on the show. Next up, Echoes from the Void with Voidy.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
Hey there, Voidy. Ready to check out some new questions from the community this week?
You know it.
All right. First up, James Mays asks, what's your best way to fight imposter syndrome, especially the part where you feel everything you write sounds exactly like someone else's writing or voice when you hit the editing part? I'll go first here. I'd highly recommend you check out my article on fighting imposter syndrome because it goes into depth on this topic, and I featured advice from a lot of other writers in the community about some of this stuff here.
That's not a very helpful answer, Bradley.
Relax. I wasn't going to stop there. My advice for dealing with imposter syndrome in terms of voice is to stop and think about what makes your voice unique. To do that, go back and read something of yours that you're proud of, and read it with an eye for the elements that stand out to you. Maybe it's the way you handle dialogue, or perhaps it's the way you approach imagery and world building. If you check out something that sort of nips the imposter syndrome in the bud, you can say to yourself, yeah, that was good, and this is why. Once you've identified those unique elements of your voice, come back to this new project and try to spot those same elements in your current draft. If they're missing, try to figure out why, and see if there's a way to implement them so it feels more like your voice. Another thing I'll say is that it's perfectly normal to be influenced by other writers and elements of their voices. That's how inspiration works. If you like the way other writers in the community approach certain things, there's nothing wrong with trying your hand at a similar style. So long as you're not copying their work word for word, you're not doing anything wrong. Every writer who's ever lived built their voice using pieces of other styles. It's the way they arrange the pieces that makes their own voice unique. Remember that stories and writing voices are always going to be similar to one another because that's a fact of life. We're all human beings, and at a certain point, we experience and describe things in a similar way. It's the tiny details and nuances that make each voice unique, and yours are there even if you can't see them. What about you, Voidy? What do you do in situations like this?
I listen to music.
Oh, okay. And how does that help?
Well, besides drowning out the haunting sounds of the void, music helps me clear my mind and remove any stories or elements that may be stuck in my head. It's like a big reset button.
Ah, I see. So by focusing on the music, you remove that recency bias towards things you may have read or seen recently. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. If I write with a clear mind, then my voice becomes clearer too.
You know what? I like that. That's good advice, Voidy. Next this week, Mary Ellen Brady asks, Voidy, I'm noticing as I write my stories that I lean on phrases and names. Thorn is the name, I've noticed a few different stories, or reactions like blood froze in her veins. I'm a creative person, so do all creatives do this when they write fast? Is there a way to not do it? I'll let you take this one first, Voidy.
Well, Mary Ellen, first of all, I'm a big fan of Starlight Cove. Secondly, the answer is yes. It's very common for specific names or phrases to become our go-to options when we're writing a lot. For example, in my Cuttlefish romance book, I like to use terms like,
Oh, hey, Voidy, let's use another example, yeah? I've read your Cuttlefish romance novel.
Okay, fine. The point is, phrases like blood freezing in the veins, or their hearts skipped a beat, or sweat beating on their forehead can be seen as cliche, but there's also a reason why they're used as often as they are. It's because they work.
You know, that's a great point, Voidy. I think it's important to try and challenge ourselves to try out new names and phrases, but there's a reason why the classics are the classics. So long as you don't use the same exact phrase or phrases inside of one story, I really don't think it's an issue. Common phrases like that can be useful because people will recognize them, and therefore it won't slow down your story's pacing. It's the same reason why imagery should be detailed but not overly complex. When we use fancy phrases or big complex words, it may sound nice, but in practice, it could trip up your reader and slow down the pacing of your story as a result. Your ultimate goal should keep them immersed. So if that means using simpler words or phrases to keep things moving, then so be it. It's better than pulling them out of the story by confusing them with something overly complex. That being said, when it comes to names, I myself like to do a bit of research to inspire ideas. Where is the character from? What should their name mean? What time period is the story set in? By asking yourself these questions, you can research names that fit into those answers, which in turn will fit well into the story. Next question this week is from Edward Marlowe Ruiz, who asks, Voidy, doubt permeates the air. What's the best way to get out of your own head? For your inky self, of course.
Wow, it sounds like the imposter syndrome bug is really going around.
I agree. I'm thinking it might be time to start thinking about a sequel to my article. How about Imposter Syndrome 2? This time it's personal.
Hey, what about Imposter Syndrome 2? Writer Boogaloo.
I like that one, Voidy. Okay, back to Edward's question, though. Voidy, what are your thoughts here?
I myself like to step away from my desk and take a walk. The worst thing you can do is try to power through it. Once you're stuck in your head, the only way out is, well, out. That's a great point, Voidy. We have to break the feedback loop in situations like that by switching up our perspective and taking a break from the writing. It may be tempting to try and push through, but once you're in that trap, it's hard to get out. Exactly. It's like those times when you get covered in ink, you know? You gotta take a shower.
I mean, yeah, I agree, but how would you take a shower if you're underwater?
It's best not to ask questions like that. The void provides. Let's leave it at that.
Okay, well, yes, a shower is a great way to reset yourself and your mind as well. As I've mentioned before, listening to some music or doing another hobby that you enjoy will give you a chance to cleanse your mind and come back with a fresh pair of eyes.
You can also try having a snack.
Voidy's right. A snack is always smart as well. The goal here is to trip up your imposter syndrome by shifting gears. It may be persistent, but it has trouble keeping up if you suddenly decide to do something else and ignore it.
You know what's funny is I actually take a similar approach with my in-laws.
Okay. Next question this week is from cap.aw, and they ask, Hi, how did you build readers? I write weird stuff.
Oh, I like weird stuff.
I like weird stuff too, Voidy. But I think the question here is, how do you find an audience of readers that are like you and me?
Well, I'd say The Void is a good place to start.
Actually, you know what? You bring up a good point. When you're first starting out, it's important to cast a wide net. A lot of people like to do an intro post or a note on here where you make a little list of things about who you are and the kind of stuff you write. And I'd say lean into the weird stuff. Talk about the elements that make it unique. Simply say, my work is for people who like blank, and go from there.
Oh yeah, and don't forget to share comparisons.
Voidy's right. In this case, it's good to compare your work to other things. For example, if you write fantasy, you could say that your work is for fans of Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, or other major franchises. By doing this, you're not trying to draw comparisons between your work and those things, but instead you're saying, hey, if you like that, then you'll like what I do as well. It allows you to find common ground with your audience, and it'll get them excited to check out your work. In addition to an intro note or post, the next thing you could do is find others who write similar things. You may not be able to find your exact brand of weird, but if you identify others in the community that are similar, you can comment and share their work as a way to build that audience around yourself with what you're doing as well. And of course, you can also submit links to your work in my weekly podcast thread for a chance to have me shout out your stories on the show. I have an article on self-promotion as well that you can find in my content directory with even more tips on that front.
Ha, very smooth, marketing man.
Hey, you know what? You don't work in marketing for a decade without picking up at least a few skills, okay, Voidy? All right, last question this week is from Nova Hart, who asks, what is the true purpose of writing? To communicate, to preserve, or to create?
Oh man, I love this question. For me, it's about creation, which ultimately leads to the other two things. As everyone knows, I'm a physical manifestation of the void, so I'm literally nothing.
Oh, come on, Voidy, don't put yourself down like that.
No, I mean like I'm the absence of space and time. I'm a literal void.
Oh, right. Yes, that's fair.
So for me, writing is about creating something from nothing. It's about filling that empty space inside of me with stories. Just because I'm an infinite void doesn't mean I can't liven up the place.
You know what, Voidy? That's actually really beautiful. I agree. I think the purpose of writing is to exercise our human ability to create. By creating, we communicate with our fellow human beings in ways that go beyond mere words. We convey emotions and concepts through the vessel of our stories, our poems, our articles, and everything else that we write.
And by creating those things and putting them out into the world, we preserve them and immortalize them with our stories.
Yes, that's exactly right. I wrote a poem a while back that was actually about how people we've lost aren't really gone if we write them into our stories. Because when we preserve them on the metaphorical page, we've given them a home where they can live on forever.
Oh no, I promised myself I wouldn't cry. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to get ink out of a white shirt.
Why are you wearing white, Voidy? And come to think of it, how does a cuttlefish wear a t-shirt anyway?
The color just called to me, okay? And we wear t-shirts like everybody else by putting them on.
All right, well, thanks for joining me this week, Voidy. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week.
All right, and now let's talk about next week on Substack. This coming week, we'll start with a new power-up prompt tomorrow. And then as we head into the week, I'll be looking at the next Divine Prelude. Now, last week I mentioned that there are 2 left before I start the series, but that was actually incorrect. I'm writing 2 more preludes myself, but there's a 3rd coming from TP Chaos, who won the Divine Challenge earlier this year. This means that they get to do a story about a character who will appear in the series as well, so stay tuned for that. The next prelude I'm writing will star a character that many Divine fans will recognize. He's known as the Blackened Knight, but the world has not been kind to him in the years since the Siege of Giantsbane. Even so, he spent the time inventing a new form of magic that leverages the same technology that almost caused the kingdom's downfall in my first ever Divine story. I'm excited to bring him back for the series as a member of Fintan Marybrook's Order of the Pawn, so stay tuned for that story this coming week. I also want to do an article about writing battle scenes, mostly because I feel like I don't have a ton of experience with that, so I'm going to educate myself and report my findings in said article. If you want to do your own version of Helm's Deep in a future story, but don't know where to begin, this article will probably be great for you as well. And of course, don't forget to keep an eye out for the Echoes from the Void thread on Monday, where you can share your questions for Voidy and myself, as well as our weekly podcast shoutout thread on Tuesday. And that's all I've got for this week, but thank you so much for being here, for supporting the show, for welcoming our guests on each week, and honestly for just being yourselves. So keep being unapologetically you, my friends. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Fintan, what are you still doing here? Are you writing? Obviously. You're taking too long to finish the damn Divine Preludes, so I'm working on the next one for you. I want to start the series, damn it! Okay, you know what? I'll take the help. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Oh, trust me, darling. It will be worth the wait.